It's 7 p.m., bedtime just imploded for the third time this week. You look across the room at your partner and you can already feel the tension between the two of you. The silent disagreement over how to handle this, who's being too soft, who's being too harsh. And underneath all of that is the question that you're maybe afraid to say out loud, which is, are we even on the same team anymore? If your kid's behavior is starting to feel like it's costing you your marriage, this episode is for you. Welcome to Raised Resilient, where we help you end the meltdowns without punishments, bribes, or yelling. I'm Dr. Hillary, clinical psychologist, parenting coach, and mom to 3 sensitive, emotionally intense kids. And I am so glad you're here. So this is a struggle that I hear from parents who are stuck in the meltdown cycle with their sensitive, emotionally intense kid all the time. And that is that we are not on the same page about how to handle these meltdowns. And actually, it's causing so much tension between us. Either they're fighting constantly about how to handle the meltdowns, or they're just so burned out from handling the meltdowns that they don't have time or energy for each other. They feel like parenting has become this constant puzzle to solve together, but not in a good way, right? It's just this exhausting trial and error that your head hits the pillow at 11 p.m., you're totally exhausted and burned out, and you don't think or talk together about anything but these meltdowns, right? So that's kind of the 2 ways that I see this play out. And if that is you, you are not alone, and it's not your fault. So I want to talk a little bit about what I see happening and why these big behaviors, aggressive behaviors, meltdowns are so challenging on our relationships with our partners. So first of all, I think it's really important to acknowledge that we all come into parenting with our own different stories, right? Some might call it baggage. We come into parenting having been parented by imperfect humans just like us, right? And when we look back at what it was like to grow up as a millennial, or certainly generations before that, our parents didn't have the resources that we do now. We didn't know what we know now about what kids need from their parents in terms of emotional safety. We didn't understand a lot of these concepts. We didn't know all that we know about attachment. And so our parents were parenting us with the best knowledge, information, resources, and capacity that they had at that time, which often was you punish behavior you don't want to see, you reward behavior you do want to see, and your kid behaves. And that was the way that people parented. But here's the thing. You had all the same emotions as a kid that your kid does now. You had all of the same limited ability to handle those emotions because your brain was still developing that your kid does right now. And so if when you had a big emotion that started coming out sideways through hits or kicks or mean words, and then your parents showed up and punished, shamed, shut you down in that moment, stop it, knock it off, get up, brush it off, you're fine, stop whining, stop overreacting, sound familiar? Then you learned to stuff those emotions down. And now, as a parent, you and your partner, you're each having your own internal reaction to your child's big behaviors and their big emotions. And most of the time, that big reaction is your nervous system going straight into fight or flight without your permission. And so both of you now are in this heightened nervous system state. But we all handle these moments differently. And so, for example, one of you might go into fight, which is like where you want to punish, you want to threaten, you want to get loud and yell, you want to shut that behavior down through some means of controlling it, right? That's a fight response from your nervous system. Some of you might want to just get the heck out of there, right? You might just want to go hide in a closet, and that's that flight response. Some of you might freeze like a deer in the headlights. You're not sure what to do. Your child starts screaming, "I hate you, you're an idiot," and you just shut down and you just stand there. And then sometimes we fawn, right? Which is where we start to walk it back. Okay, fine, here, you can have a second cookie, just stop having a meltdown, right? And if your go-to knee-jerk response is different than your partner's, which is often the case, right? We might have one partner who goes to fight and the other who goes to fawn. And those partners look at each other and one thinks, "Oh my goodness, you are so strict. Why are you so harsh with this kid?" And then The one who goes into fight mode looks at the partner who fawns and thinks, why are you always giving in? This is your fault. This is why she acts like this, right? And around we go. Now, here's how that plays out practically. So often we have one parent who is actively trying to fix this. And I will say, in my experience, it is often mom, but that doesn't mean, I'm sure there are dads out there who are going through Instagram reels and trying to figure out, what are we going to do to end these meltdowns? But we have one parent, again, usually mom, sitting there scrolling every night, looking for that one thing that is going to finally stop this, right? They're following all the parenting influencers. They're listening to all the podcasts. They're sending their partner all of the different tips and strategies. And usually this is the person who is trying to break some of these harmful generational cycles, like yelling, punishing, spanking, etc., right? And this person knows that is not how I want to show up to parenting. That doesn't feel good to me. And I know it's not helping my kid. But the other partner is like watching this partner, the one who's doing all the scrolling, trying to implement those random tips and strategies. And they're watching them going, well, what you're doing is not working. So we're going to do things my way. And that way is we're going to get stricter. We're going to, start punishing. We're going to teach them that these behaviors are not okay. Neither of those approaches works because, again, the one who's doing the doom scrolling does not have a full framework to follow. So they're just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And of course, that doesn't lead to confident parenting. And then the other partner, again, is watching that and thinking, well, you're just a pushover. You're just letting him walk all over you. So I'm going to step up and parent this kid, which again, often looks like punishment and shutting down big emotions. And so we stay trapped in this cycle of trying to figure out between the two of us what's the best way to parent this child. And again, that makes so much sense. We come to this place from bringing our entire childhood into parenting and not realizing it. And when you bring two people into parenting with two separate experiences, that's often going to clash. How do we manage this dynamic of constantly feeling like we are arguing about how to show up to these meltdowns? I think it's really important to acknowledge the nervous system piece. Like I said, these reactions to our kids' behaviors, they are largely triggered nervous system responses. And we don't see it that way. We see that one person is harsh and the other doesn't set boundaries, right? We see it as one person yells and the other person gives in. But really, we're having a nervous system response. And so this is where learning how to become aware of what is happening in your own body and regulate your nervous system. And again, that doesn't mean that you're never going to feel frustrated or sad or triggered. It means that you become aware of those triggers and you learn what your body needs to be able to respond to those triggers in a healthy way. So that's the first piece, is that we each are responsible for regulating our own nervous system. And a lot of times that is deep work. That is not something that we can watch an Instagram reel and know how to do. And it's ongoing work. It takes becoming comfortable being in your body, noticing what's happening, and learning what you need to stay regulated and attuned and present for your kid, right? And when both of you can do that, you're going to be so much better able to work as a team. Because think about it, if you are two dysregulated nervous systems with a third dysregulated little person whose brain is still not developed, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Of course, these moments are spiraling. And the other thing about it is that as the two of you come into this situation, you're triggered by your child's meltdowns. Now you become triggered by each other too, and how each other is handling the meltdowns. And you can see how easily we are co-escalating that meltdown instead of co-regulating that meltdown, okay? Another piece that is really important is that I think we have to acknowledge that there is often an invisible mental load involved in parenting a child who feels things deeply. And it often is, in my experience, that one parent is carrying more of that load than the other, right? And again, this is probably the parent who is scrolling on Instagram and sending their partner the reels or the podcast episodes. Maybe you're sending your partner this podcast episode, right? But that person is carrying this immense load of not only trying to do the research to figure out how to end the meltdowns, but also trying to break harmful generational cycles and convince their partner that this is the way to go. And I think that's a really heavy lift. And so I think the next piece that we have to remember here is that we can't control how our partners show up to parenting. We can only ever control ourselves. And while it's great to be in conversation about how we want to show up to parenting, I think it's more important to talk about what outcomes we want for our kids and what values we have for our kids. And often from there, then the strategy will follow, right? So if we can say, I want my child to grow up with the emotion regulation skills to handle uncomfortable emotions so that they don't go straight to hitting, kicking, and calling me an idiot, right? I bet you your partner would be on board with that, even if the how is yet to be decided on. So can we talk about what we want for our kids? I want our kids to be successful, resilient human beings. I want my child to grow up able to show empathy to other people and to be kind. These are things that we all want. And I think if we can talk about it from that perspective, we're going to be in such a better place to figure out the how versus arguing over strategies and getting lost in the weeds. And looking at your partnership with clear eyes around who is carrying more of that mental load. And if that's you, how can you actively offload some of that? Not in a make a list for your partner kind of way, but in a open conversations about what the load is that you're carrying so that maybe you can carry it together, right? And again, I think those values-based conversations really help with that. So talking about, this is what I want for our kids, and your partner being able to say, yeah, me too. Great. Here's what I've been doing about that. What do you think we should do? How can we approach this in a better way? The other conversation that you have to have with your partner is reflecting on and owning together what you each bring from your own childhood into the parenting dynamic. So that might sound like, when I was a child, I was constantly told I was too sensitive. Or when I was a kid and I felt angry, my dad went straight to yelling and would make me feel really scared. And so I would just be quiet, even though I still felt really mad. And I remember crying in my room for hours, all alone, not sure what to do with those feelings, right? That might be an example. And when you share these things with your partner, getting curious about the other person's experience, wow, that sounds really hard. What was that like for you? I wonder if that makes it hard when our child then has a kicking, screaming meltdown and calls you names. That sounds like it would be really hard to sit and watch those behaviors that were shut down in you as a child. And this is a really important and really, really common dynamic where because we were shut down as children in those moments, and a lot of times that felt really unsafe because we depended on our parents for survival. We didn't want them to be mad at us. So when we see our kids doing behaviors that lost us love when we were kids, that does send our nervous systems straight into fight or flight or fawn or freeze. And so recognizing why we go to that place, recognizing what's happening for ourselves and connecting that back to our own experiences as kids and sharing that space together is a really important part of this process. And the more that the two of you can reflect on those experiences and hold space for those experiences that you both bring to this parenting dynamic, the more you will be able to show up differently for your own child. Because just reflecting on those experiences is such a healing thing for your nervous system, for your inner child. You need to be able to reflect on how you were parented, how you're showing up now, and the connection between the two. That's so important. And doing that together in your partnership is going to create so much more space for the two of you to work together as a team. And then I would say the third thing is having a shared framework. This is really important because if one of you is just doing constant research, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, you're not going to feel confident in implementing that because you're just getting these piecemeal tips that you're not sure how they fit together and you're not really sure why you're doing what you're doing. So having that shared framework versus just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks is so important. And that piece often brings you together in a way that you didn't realize you needed, because it's not one person trying to convince the other. It's both of you trying to implement a framework together. It takes the burden off of one of you to try to convince the other person that this strategy is the thing, right? So how do you get that shared framework? Well, look, if this is resonating, I actually explain my suggested framework in my video, How to End the Meltdowns in 8 Weeks or Less. It's linked in the show notes. So check that video out. Maybe watch it together with your partner, because that is a great way to start to get aligned on those values, what you want for your child, and also to align on some of the how. And so if you are feeling like, gosh, I really need a shared framework, I need a way to at least share with my partner how I see things in terms of parenting and what I want for our kid, I need a way to start that conversation. Check out How to End the Meltdowns in 8 Weeks or Less, because I think it will give you a really great entry point to those conversations. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.